Welcome to Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table. The podcast for pet groomers ready to start their next chapter. Let's explore what's possible when you trade in the grooming table for the freedom of virtual work. Whether you're done with the physical toll or just craving more flexibility, you're in the right place. We're staying in the pet industry, just shifting how we show up. So take a breath, step away from the table, and let's see what's waiting for you on the other side.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table podcast, where we talk to people that have stepped away from the table and now we're going to see and explore what's beyond it. So, as always, I am your host, River Lee of the Savvy Groomer and Step Away from the Table, and my amazing co host, Jess of Groomer Support Services. So, we are going to be talking today about why grooming virtual assistants are better than AI receptionists. Now, this is going to be aimed at grooming business owners, which we are lovingly going to be calling supervisors for sanity's sake, who are considering AI over hiring a real VA. Now, we will touch upon obviously the receptionist side, but I also want to explore the other sides of people thinking they're going to just hire, and I say hire, AI to do a job, how they're going to utilize AI to do a job. And then obviously how VAs are going to be a better option potentially. And I think we should be honest and open because I think it's important to recognize that VAs do use AI to support them, but I don't think it necessarily replaces them. So, Jess, now you are a virtual assistant, but you do not necessarily do receptionist work. Can you explain maybe the differences or how you might do some of those tasks versus?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I think the main difference between, and I'll speak for myself, groomer VAs can go any direction they like and how they operate, right? That's the beauty of this. I don't personally work on any particular schedule. If I want to work at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., I have that. So, and I'm in different time zones than a lot of my supervisors. So, working as a receptionist implies that you are on call available during their working hours or office hours. And in this case, I'm not. But that doesn't mean I don't call back or speak with via text or call with the supervisor's clients. So often I help implement my systems with a lot of boundaries and clarity. And I tell them to put expectations on their clients. So anybody that I answer the phone for, I'm not going to be answering it when it rings, right? But they have an away message on. And okay, let me backtrack. If for those who don't even know, you're like, wait, how do you pick up the phone for your clients when they live far away? They ship you their phone? No, there's like all sorts of online based phone services out there. So I work with a couple of them. Just throw out Google Voice as an example if you want to like little research online, but go ahead and do that. So yeah, so I will people will call from the client experience. It goes to voice message, and on that voice message, it says, "Thanks for calling this line. You know, somebody will get back to you within 24 hours. We're busy grooming dogs, so we only check this line once a day." Or say, like, insert your office hours,
Mhm.
right? So in that case, for me, I come back, I check once a day for these messages, and I'll call them back appropriately during office hours. So I do try and make sure I'm available to do that at least once a day for the most part. So that's how I handle the receptionist aspect of things. It just allows flexibility for me and realistic expectation on my supervisor's clients, which I don't see any issue with.
Yeah.
Um,
So I
yeah.
want to piggyback on that. So those of you guys that have followed the Savvy Groomer for a while, you know this is exactly how, and Jess may or may not know this, but this is exactly how I teach everyone. Everyone should not necessarily pick up the phone people call because it's overwhelming. And honestly, I think it really hurts client relations So if you have office hours, or if, because I think office hours are really nice and they can only be 2 hours every 3 days, like it doesn't need to be a lot of time. If a client knows when you're going to call them back or when you're going to be responding to them, they can be available during those times.
Mhm.
And obviously, if they can't be available during those times, they'll leave you a voicemail or a text message saying, "Hey, I'm not available during those times. Can we set up this particular time?" I think that makes it a lot easier because, many moons ago, right? It used to kind of work like this. You used to have to leave a recording for people. And, right, like, I mean, it wasn't uncommon that my grandparents, I would leave them a voicemail on their phone and they might not get a call back that day because by the time they check their messages, it might not be till late in the evening. And so they might call me back the next day. And I think the culture has changed wildly to people needing to be available 24/7. And
Mhm.
I think if you let people make you feel that you have to be available 24/7 and your business be available 24/7, it creates a very unhealthy dynamic in that. So whether you're setting that up for your own business just as yourself and you're going to answer your calls like that, or you're going to have a VA, I think either way, that's a really smart way of doing it.
Mhm.
And to me, having a professional virtual assistant who understands the industry, who knows how you want to speak to customers, is going to be a lot better than having this kind of verbal chatbot answer right
Mhm.
away, right? I think if you ask the majority of your clients, hey, would you rather us call you back? You don't really have a 6 hour window, but it's going to be with somebody who is competent and kind and understands and can communicate properly. Or we can answer the phone right now, but it's going to essentially be a chatbot. Which do you think that the average client would prefer to have answered?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful example laid out, and I think the answer is the first one. I think for better or for worse, people just prefer to talk to real people, and that still persists, and not just for the older generation. Although, for a lot of our supervisors, older generation of people are an ideal client, even if that means we have to call them now and again because especially for mobile, they're flexible, they're reliable, they're able to pay the bills sometimes not, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't mind this aspect. And yes, River, I did learn these boundaries from you. I implemented them in my own business Um, back in the day, like not too
Back,
long ago.
back in the day when we were old. No. But I
Yeah.
think I think that's exactly it. So when you have those kinds of boundaries, it does make it easier in your business. And I think a lot of times for me, the reason that you hire a virtual assistant is also maybe they've taken Savvy Groomers classes and they can suggest if you have
Mhm.
somebody in a more management role. I don't suggest for people in the foundational level that are literally just, implementers, right? These people that are also going to be like, our systems queen over here, Jess, right? She's somebody that is going to be able, for better for worse, to come in and say, hey, I've learned this from the Savvy Groomer. This is a best practices. I highly suggest that we do this. It's going to save you a lot of money because instead of paying
Mhm.
PA, 40 hours a week to be available on call, which makes no sense, to
Mhm.
maybe as little as 3 to 6 hours a week, which is going to save you a ton of money.
Ton of money, and then it brings in the nuance that I keep mentioning as well in previous episodes regarding AI. We really need a person to be able to work within the understanding of our industry terms and knowledge and that nuance that exists so prevalently. Like I'm not against anyone who wants to utilize an AI receptionist. I think you also need a human backup as well, and you should know that there is a potential of losing customers in that way. Um, and I just want to asterisk to the point that you brought up about me being a systems person and operating more of like a management level communication with some of my clients. I want to be clear that in my offerings, that is a higher tier service that is part of my onboarding. I don't break it down so clearly to my supervisors or people interested in hiring me because it will get confusing. But essentially, like a lot of that, like cleaning up their systems and the way they work and trying to save them time and money, both in how they pay me and how they operate, is all done in my onboarding, which is different from the VA services I offer monthly. That's a lower price because the job is more simple as
Yeah,
opposed to collaborative and management level. I hope that makes sense. There's,
absolutely. Yeah.
I branded it as such.
Yeah. And I think it's really important. So, step away from the table, we're training groomers to become virtual
Mhm,
assistants that you can then hire as supervisors. And, we look at it as three different tiers. So we have our foundational level, those people that are going to be able to work within your systems to do the tasks, right? And some of you guys might be like, well, why don't I just hire ChatGPT to do that? Because again, like ChatGPT and these other systems are really not going to be able like to integrate those systems, right? It's kind of like it's not a virtual assistant or online booking. It's online booking with your virtual assistant, making sure that those online bookings are correct, that if there's any issue with those online bookings, they're going in and making sure that they're rectified, right?
mhm,
And then I do think there is this higher tier, which is your management level. And that's somebody who can say, hey, this online booking thing is not for you. So let's figure out a way to instead together collaboratively create that. And to me, someone needs more training. Um, and again, that tier two, and it's a different level, like you said, Jess, of being able to manage those things. I don't think those tier two things will ever be able to be replaced by AI. I think the
mhm,
tier one could be supported with AI, but even
mhm.
then, we've used the example of if your policies state that you can't have a pug shaved, you can't have a double-coated dog shaved, right? And for whatever reason, your virtual assistant, right, is booking in shaved pugs. Well, that's not a system error. That is a person not doing their job. That's very different than AI, right? Some kind of virtual receptionist than booking in that pug, right? It's a lot easier to fire someone because they're not listening to you versus figuring out what's wrong with your AI and how to fix it, right? Because again, how are you going to explain to a virtual receptionist that a pug can't be shaved, right? I mean, how do you even begin to code that?
Yeah, and that's where groomer VAs, we bring robust experience, continuing education, just a wider breadth of knowledge about the industry that AI can really not provide. And we talked about this in a former episode about like if you tried to put grooming terms and lingo and understanding into ChatGPT, you'll see the wild and crazy things that come out. It makes no sense. Like
Yeah.
there's it's really not helpful because they don't get it. They don't get it. My friend ChatGPT does
Is
not
it?
get it.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I've used this example to death, but if this is your first time listening to it, I use the example of a instructor who was using the word clippers, like we all know grooming clippers, and the translator who was human used the translation word for nail clippers. And this person who was translating was not a groomer. And so if you can imagine an entire grooming seminar thinking that you're using nail clippers, it would make no sense. And again, this is a person, so we can say, hey, this is what I mean. And it's a lot easier to explain it to a person than AI. And I think that we are wildly in a long time. And it's funny because I feel like every single sci-fi movie that's about AI literally brings this up, right? It is this machine that doesn't understand human beings. And yet a lot of supervisors or grooming business owners that I speak with, they think, oh, well, I'll just hire, AI to do all of these things. I'm like, I feel like every sci-fi movie with an android literally explains that the amount of time and energy to get that machine to become more human-like, or it becomes human-like in a very dystopian way, right? We already know that. We've had 50 years of cinema that has taught us that, and yet we feel like we're magically going to overcome all of those potential realities.
Yeah, and like I keep saying, us groomer VAs, we're not being replaced, we're just being supported by AI. Like it's integrated in the work that we do. Yes, but I just don't think it's a solid one fix all for our supervisors looking for some extra support. I mean, it's complicated.
It is really complicated, and just because I think a lot of grooming business owners, you don't know what you don't know, right? And again, if you're
Mhm,
not currently playing with AI, or if you're playing with it in like a more like fun way versus a practical way,
mhm,
um, like I think that's really important because I do think groomer VAs bring a lot of nuance to what we're doing. And I
mhm,
also think that they can't read the room. In previous episodes, we've talked about tones and how to make our brain the boss. And I'm sure, we could talk all day about all these funny examples of,
mhm,
cinema where you have an android or an AI robot that doesn't get the joke, right? Or
mhm,
makes an accidentally inappropriate comment, right? Because they're
mhm,
not getting the context. So, Jess, if you're
mhm.
going to speak to the supervisors in this podcast, how would you maybe explain, right, about how specifically like a virtual AI receptionist may not read the room in a conversation?
Yeah, this falls under nuance, right? And the human element. I would give the best example of this is just your high maintenance clients, right? Your ones that are asking a bit more of you, either of your like time and attention, or they're unhappy with a groom and you want to keep them as a client. They're just a little off. Like not everybody is like a red flag fire client. And we love some high maintenance clients in the nice term. I don't know if there's anyway. So, I have great communication with my supervisors, but I also integrate their team on my communication channels. So the team often gives me feedback. So I have understanding of context of what happened here. Say in the example of following up with a client that's like, I need a redo, I'm not happy. I can do this really peacemaker, good good client communication, professionalism. But I also have context to like maybe reset expectations. Like, hey, I know I had notes about you not wanting the feet trimmed. Like, let's have your dog come back in. We'll trim it to your liking and we'll make note on the count about that. This is a collaboration point between not only just the supervisor and myself, but also their team in some capacity because we want to make it right. And sometimes it's a little misunderstanding that I just don't think that an AI receptionist can fill that gap.
I agree. I also think that that situation too, and again, policies are really important, boundaries are really important, but an AI receptionist isn't going to be able to either get the sniff test that maybe something isn't quite right,
Hmm.
right? I mean, for better or worse, you might have clients that are, I don't want to say are trying to screw you, but you know there's something wrong, and again,
Hmm.
an AI receptionist is not going to get the feeling that maybe this person's just trying to push for a free groom. Maybe this person is, again, insert other thing. I mean, I can think of 1,000 examples. I feel like that could be a whole episode on its own.
Hmm.
Or on the flip side, AI may not know when to make an exception, right? Because again, there might be a situation where, the policy is no refunds, right? No refunds, no matter what. And then you find out that one of the groomers has cut the ear tip off of a dog. Terrible example, but things happen. And for whatever reason, they charge the groom the full price, and you're dealing with that client, right? AI is going to look at the policies and say no refunds for zero reasons, like because it's not a person. It can't recognize we done goofed. We charged this lady full price. And there's definitely some examples of that. It could be that people prepay for the groom. Maybe it's a monthly membership situation. There's a lot of software that when you check out, it automatically charges the card. So there's lots of instances where that could accidentally happen.
Hmm.
And you just, as a VA, if you were in that situation, knowing the grooming industry, you would know what to ask the groomer. Like, how did this accident happen?
Hmm.
Right? And versus
Yeah.
AI is going to make up crazy things. I would love to challenge everybody here who's a grooming business owner, ask ChatGPT what to say if a groomer cut the tip off of a dog. I would love because it's going to give you crazy things that you probably shouldn't do, right? Because it doesn't
Hmm.
understand our industry. And if you asked it, how would that happen?
Hmm.
Right? it's not going to give you a groomer answer. It's going to give you a crazy answer. Because we've been in the chair, and someone like Jess and I have been on the table and seen maybe not, we've all seen crazy. If you've been, the longer you groom, either you've heard crazy stories or you've seen people make really bad choices as groomers, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
so your virtual assistant who's also been a groomer or been in the grooming industry is going to be able to handle those with more nuance. Um, and I'm sure, Jess, you can maybe not speak on ever being in that situation where you've had to tell a client something terrible has
Mhm.
happened.
Mhm.
But I think if that were to happen, I'm sure your supervisors would significantly rather have you, Jess,
Mhm.
in groomer support services versus this virtual AI. So when that person calls in who's like,
Mhm.
I can't believe you cut my dog's ear tip off, but you also charged me
Mhm.
that price. I mean, can you even imagine calling that and it's a virtual AI? How would you even feel?
Yeah, and if that, and then I bet the supervisor would be like, I'm not even going to do that. And so it puts stress and work on themselves for a really intense conversation. And that could just be, again, off put to the middleman, the groomer VA. And I just want to note too, as well, that like in the work that I do with my systems implementation is I think very thoughtfully from my knowledge of the grooming industry to catch red flags on intakes. I want to avoid any issues before they happen. Like, obviously, accidents happen, but anything that could be mitigated or like, I'm like, this is not going to work out very well. I've noted that. I've caught it early. So, and sometimes you just got to talk to clients differently a little bit. Um, there's just, there's a need for a real human problem solving um,
Yes.
element to the work that we do. And I really can't imagine at this current state for sure, but even in the future, how AI could read those nuances and work it out. I mean, it's, it's just comes off robotic and people will catch that. Like we say, better or worse, people want to talk with a real person. Um,
I agree. And even if you switch your business completely to texting, which again, Savvy Groomer fully supports, if you don't want to have to physically call people and you really want your in-person interactions to shine, like if you're a mobile groomer and you're going to spend that extra time in person as the groomer with those clients or however you choose to do it, I just don't think those chat bots work for people. I can't tell you how many times I've been talking to a chatbot and
mhm,
gotten super pissed off because, again, it's not answering my question
mhm,
or it's just pulling resources that I've already looked at, right? Like it'll be like, um, like if I have an issue with like I need to return a shoe and it's a certain size and it's like here is how you return it. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't tell me how to like exchange it. And I'm like, how do I exchange
mhm,
things? So it keeps sending me to resources or things that I already know. It's like, listen, I'm
mhm.
not being lazy reaching out to the chat bot. I've already looked up the FAQ, I've already looked up the things, and now I just need an answer. And I think again, that's where a real person helps.
And I want to also add to that, we're talking a lot about troubleshooting and
Mhm.
problem solving, but beyond that, I notice a lot of audits that I do for clients, and I do an audit for my supervisors, people interested in working with me. I can give you a rating system of 1 through 5 in 8 different categories, and I assess and I deep dive into your business and I see what's going on. And I see a lot of automation, which is great, but there's an element that I bring to the work I do, which I think is important, is like I have real conversations with people outside of just like, hey, here's a text reminder or here's an issue, let me solve it. Like my my go-to thing, which is kind of silly, but like when someone responds back to me and to a question I've brought up or a conversation, I'll respond with like perfect, but I'll spell it like PURRRFECT, like perfect. It's kind of silly, but it's just like my lingo. And it brings that no, they know they're talking with me. And a lot of my clients, like my supervisor's clients, my supervisor has told their clients that my scheduler, my VA is Jess. And so they know me as well. And so they know that I'm talking to them. And it's not like Jess, the AI robot,
Right.
like I'm real and they know that. And we have conversations. I mean, I I sometimes end up just talking with lonely old people sometimes. And I think that's important now and again, not overburdeningly so, but like, yeah, I want to know that you're doing okay. I'm sorry that you had a fall, like send love,
Yeah. And I think that brings up, and a lot of the reason I bring up the troubleshooting is because I think the way my brain is wired is if something bad goes wrong, are you willing to deal with it? And I think that
Mhm.
when we're talking about AI, we're always talking about like the rosy side, like the perfect side. But I agree. And I think, as far as VAs go, if you're hiring a VA and you're specifically wanting somebody who's going to make a lot of phone calls, then you're hiring somebody who enjoys that. I think a lot
Mhm.
of grooming business owners are supervisors, right, for these VAs. They're not necessarily people. They're great at grooming, they're great at running a business, they're hard
Mhm.
workers. And it's really hard. I know for me, and this is probably 14 years ago now, when I had my grooming salon and we did high volume. So we were doing about 40 dogs a day. Um, and we had a membership model. It was a totally different model. And I wanted to spend all of my time, energy, and love on the dogs when I had my grooming salon. And so I hired a receptionist because I didn't have the emotional energy to be present for the dogs and be there for the dogs. With a dog training background, I dealt with a lot of
Mhm.
dogs who were either kicked out of other salons or they had a lot of issues. Like they needed a lot of support. And I didn't have the emotional energy to then go out and be nice to people. I just didn't. Like I'd be like, your dog bit me and crapped on me because he's scared, and he's scared because you haven't worked with him. And that emotional energy and being mad for the dog's sake, because owners don't always know how to, pet owners, pet parents don't always know how to support their animals and they're accidentally traumatizing them. And so being able to hand off those conversations in a positive, upbeat, supportive way to somebody else, I think really helped my business because I couldn't be there
Mhm.
both for the dog and the owner because my heart was there for the dogs. It was not there for the owners. And I had a lot of misplaced anger towards the owner because their dog was hurting and it was hard for me to support that dog and not judge or blame the owner. And that's also a journey for some of us. Some of us are in that space and place where we haven't grown as a person, where we can be both, or maybe we'll never be both. There's nothing wrong with that. And so being able to have a Jess who can communicate the progress and communicate what's going on in a way that isn't judgmental, it isn't blaming, right? And that can
Yeah.
make a world of difference and allow you to focus on the healing journey if that's your business model of that dog.
1,000%. And I'm with you there. When I was owning and operating my own business, I did every aspect of it. And sometimes that client communication fell short for me. Which was sad because I enjoyed that aspect so well, but it was kind of like down to the low energy aspect. And so, yeah, I think a lot of our groomers are like that. I know if more than one of my clients are hired me for this reason. They're like, look, I'm not very organized. I don't like talking with clients, and I bring it, I love it now that I am like away from grooming as like a means to an end and like a career that was a little bit edging towards burnout. Like I have this space to be the happy, joyful, communicative partner to my supervisor that I always wished that I could be for myself. And to that point as well, like when I have bad days, and we all have bad days, like I mentioned this in a previous episode, I have a chat GPT channel that I'll run through my responses for client communication roles just to make sure that it still has that friendly edge that I normally bring. So if I'm feeling a little short and that's maybe not the best, I have consistency for sure.
I love that. So I want to just ask, is there anything else you want to touch upon speaking to those supervisors who maybe are still on the fence about hiring a virtual AI receptionist versus a VA for the pet grooming industry? Is there anything else you might want to touch upon before we end this podcast?
Hmm. I think we covered a lot. I would just say, consider giving us Groomer VAs a try. You can check out my business and I have audits, I have no contract, so you can work with me for a month. You're like, this is not for me. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like try your AI receptionist for a month. If that's not for you, that's fine. There's so many options out there.
Well, I would caution you, I would try a VA for the grooming industry first
Mhm.
versus a virtual AI receptionist. Virtual AI receptionist. Here's the thing. If you piss off somebody due to it being a person, I think for
Mhm.
better or for worse, your clients are more like, oh, I'm glad you fired that person. If you
Mhm.
piss off people because you used AI, I think people are less patient for that. I have no answer
Mhm.
why, but it's true, right? If you call your bank and you've been dealing with that
Mhm.
chat bot or you've been dealing with their AI receptionist,
Mhm.
you're pissed off. And then the next person you deal with, you're super pissed off. If I went to
Mhm.
someone who's incompetent and that other person's like, I'm so sorry, that other person was incompetent here now. I don't know why, but I always feel better. I'm like, that person now has me. But if it's because
Mhm.
you wanted to cheap out and buy AI receptionist, I'm pissed. I'm like, I don't know. Human psyche
Yeah.
sometimes,
No,
right?
you'll honestly, I think you would love having a groomer VA over a receptionist any day. Like I think you'll be sold on any of the services that we offer. So,
I
but
think it's
teach
also
their own.
teach their
Teach their own.
own. There's no wrong answer.
That's right.
I love, and I will say it's always nice too to be able to communicate with somebody who's been in your shoes, who's been working in the grooming industry, and they just understand you better. So anyway,
Yeah, there
this
you go.
was the Step Away from the Table Beyond the Table podcast. And, this is our podcast about why grooming virtual assistants are better than AI receptionists. And again, this was aimed towards grooming business owners, which we call supervisors for sanity's sake, who are considering AI over hiring a real virtual assistant. And as always, I am River Lee of the Savvy Groomer and Step Away from the Table. And this is my wonderful co host, Jess of Groomer Support Services. Now, Jess, if these um, supervisors slash grooming business owners want to check you out or want to see what services you offer, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, my branding and name is Groomer Support Services. You can find me at my website under that name and socials as well. So explore what I can offer. And I also have a 30-minute free discovery call if you want to chat more and find what works best for you.
Wonderful. All right, guys. So take it easy. And as always, happy grooming.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining me on Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table. If today's episode sparked something in you, don't forget to follow, share, or leave a review. It helps more groomers like you find their next step. You don't have to do this alone, but you get to do it your way. Until next time, take a deep breath and keep moving forward.